The New York Jets with another blowout loss, another game in which they were outcoached, outplayed, lack of accountability, a big issue, poor coaching, and we've all heard this song before. I'm Glenn Naughton with Jet Nation Radio and JetNation.com, joined as usual by my co-host Chris Schubert to discuss this where this team is at right now, which is obviously football hell, where they're heading, and why that's where they're going. Chris, how we doing?
Doing well, Glenn. Happy holidays to you, the listeners. Happy New Year, just around the corner. This will be the last time I'm on the show between now and 2024. But yeah, listen, this was not a surprise that this is the way that this team played on Thursday night. It's the way that they have played on short rest, on primetime games in the Robert Saleh era. Nothing about this should surprise everybody. It should alarm. It should concern you for the future. And I'm sure we'll get into all of the angles. And I will tell you, it's rare. I think it's happened twice since I've joined the show. I've got notes today for the show. I wrote some stuff down.
I can't blame you. It was extremely frustrating, outside of the first drive where their first opening drive touchdown since their win against the Bears last year. But really once that drive wrapped up, it was punt, fumble, turnover. Um
Don't forget the pick six.
yeah, it was ugly game all around. Of course, listen, it's an NFL football game. You're gonna have the occasional nice play. Jermaine Johnson with the fantastic pick six. One of the plays of the year, really, for the team, and one of the players of the year, really, if we're being honest, in Jermaine Johnson. But the Jets, I mean, the my biggest takeaway from this game, Chris, was the lack of accountability that we see every week. This team, and I've said for years, and I just mentioned this on another pod that I did, that I've said for years that penalties are on the players. Like, you're professionals. You've been playing this game for 10, 15, in some cases 20 plus years. You know where to line up. You know when to fire out. You know what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do to block a guy. However, when it gets to this level and it just continues and continues and continues, at some point, even me, even the guy who says it's on the players, it's on the play, I'm looking at the coaches and I'm going, what are we doing to fix this? And they asked Robert Saleh in his presser today, Chris. They said, what do you do to fix the penalties? And you know what he sounded like to me? And I said this on the other show I just did. He sounded to me, it was the equivalent of asking a fireman, what's going on with all these fires we're having that you guys can't put out? And the fireman, in response, starts listing off all the different things that cause fires, but doesn't answer how they're going to put them out. Well, you've got arson, you've got electric, you got faulty wiring. Sometimes people fall asleep with a cigarette in their hand. Right. But how are you going to fix it? Sometimes it's a revenge thing. Someone throws a Molotov cocktail. Like, right. That's Robert Saleh. Robert, what are you going to do to fix the penalties? Well, it's something we got to clean up, and we get the pre-snap stuff and lining up in the wrong place. Right. I know. We know. That's why we're asking. And he's talking like he's a rookie coach. He's in year 3, 4, week 17. What are you going to do? Oh, I got to figure it out. That's not good enough. And what bothers me, Chris, and I said this to you right before we started, the number of times I see Robert Saleh screaming at an official who makes a mistake, which I have no problem with. But when has he ever screamed at a player who makes a mistake? He wants to be everyone's buddy. From Joe Beningo on down, Robert Saleh wants everyone to be his friend. And instead of grabbing a guy by the collar and straightening him out, it's a pat on the helmet, it's a pat on the backside. It's a good job, good try, good effort. But give me a second. I'm going to go scream at this referee because he made a mistake right after you had that holding call.
Your takeaway from the game last night should have been one thing and one thing only. The New York Jets are not a top 10. They're not a top 15. They're not a top 20 team in terms of coaching in the National Football League. They got outcoached. They got outclassed. They got outprepared by the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns are the complete opposite. And this is nothing new. A lot of people have said this because it's easy. Anybody with two eyes who's watching the game can echo this point. The Cleveland Browns are everything the New York Jets should be this season if they were well coached, if they were well prepared, if they were well run as a team. Do you know, Glenn, that the Cleveland Browns went into last night without Nick Chubb? Do you know they went into last night losing 3 offensive tackles, including 2 starters and their top backup, their draft selection in DeJuan Jones. Do you know that they were without Amari Cooper in that football game? Did you know, Glenn, that they were on their 4th quarterback of the season, just like the New York Jets? They're 11-5. They've clinched a playoff spot, and they're still mathematically alive to win the division and be the 1 seed in the AFC. The New York Jets are 6-10, spinning in circles trying to figure out what's wrong with their team. I'll tell you what's wrong with their team. They're poorly coached. They're poorly run. Robert Saleh is not a good football coach. He just isn't. He doesn't have the team prepared. They've been outscored by 56 points in the first quarter this season. He doesn't do in-game stuff well. How about a timeout in the third quarter with 12 minutes left? Unprepared, not ready to play. He's not aggressive. He's conservative and cowardly. How about the kicking a field goal down 34-17 with 9:34 left in the third quarter? How about the delay of game that they took that led to a punt that was in the 99th percentile of cowardly punts in 2023? If you assume that they took the penalty unintentionally, it would only be in the 92nd percentile of cowardly punts in 2023. So they're unaggressive. They're cowardly. They're not coached well. They don't start well. The defense is starting to falter late. I asked the question, what does Robert Saleh do well as a head football coach? What does he do well? He's not calling the defensive plays. It took them until week 17 to think of the idea of having Sauce travel with the best receiver. It's funny how that information only comes out after Amari Cooper's not playing in the game, and we don't get to see that in action. You're after the game in week 17 saying, we got to figure it out. There's 1 week left, Robert. It's over. The season's over. They're not coached well. They do not prepare well. They don't play well on short rest. They don't play well in prime time. They don't play well in December and January under Robert Saleh. They are not a good football team from a coaching perspective. But don't worry, Glenn. Robert Saleh's coming back. Joe Douglas is coming back. Nathaniel Hackett is coming back. All of the major pieces of this coaching staff will be returning in 2024, and Aaron Rodgers will fix all of those problems.
And listen, the Robert Saleh stuff, he's another head coach. We see it all the time in the league. And it always baffles me. And every now and then you'll hear a former player comment on it. All these coaches that make things harder than they have to be. And I feel like this team, I feel like Robert Saleh, I get that they brought Randall Cobb in to make Aaron Rodgers happy, but he's got nothing left in the tank. You watch Xavier Gibson touch the ball one time, and you can see he's more explosive and has more ability to make a play than Randall Cobb does. You watch Izzy Abanikanda touch the ball one time and watch Dalvin Cook touch the ball 50 times, and you know Izzy Abanikanda gives you a better chance to make a play with the ball in his hands. But because these guys have seniority, it's the old, we used to see this a lot in the old days, guys like Parcells. Like, they don't like to play the rookies. They don't like to play the young kids. Saleh is he's starting inferior players because they've got seniority or they're friends with Aaron Rodgers. And, even you look at, excuse me, I said this the other day. I mentioned this on the show the previous day with all the Nick Bawden stuff. And I have tweets from preseason. In the preseason, when I was saying, why is Nick Bawden on the roster when Jeremy Ruckert can do what he does better? And we see Jeremy Ruckert filling for Nick Bawden the other day, and the boost he gave to the running game, the key blocks he was making, he had one up the middle, he had one on the outside. Ruckert, and I look at stuff like that, and I know, there's stuff that Joe Douglas deserves to get killed for, but I have no doubt they're sitting in meetings, and Joe Douglas is going to try to give his coaching staff what they tell him they need. So if Nate Hackett says, I got to have Nick Bawden, he's my guy, this is where Joe Douglas has to say, listen, I've watched both of them play, Ruckert and Bawden. Ruckert is the better player. I'm booting Bawden. I'm bringing in either another lineman, another something, and Bawden goes, and we're going to start playing the best players. I don't want to hear you're dead last in the NFL in every offensive category, but Izzy Abanikanda can't get on the field because he struggles in pass pro. How about get him the ball in some plays where you don't ask him to pass protect? And if he does pass protect, is another sack going to make that much of a difference to the worst offense in the NFL? Start playing your best players.
I will jump in and say this. When Aaron Rodgers went down 4 plays into the season, it was a gift in some ways to the upper brass of the New York Jets. It allowed them a very raw and very uncut look at what was wrong with their franchise. Coaching, personnel, play calling, everything. That was what 2023 became. an evaluation point to allow you to see what needed to be changed. Robert Saleh, 3 years as a head coach. Joe Douglas, 4 or 5 years as the general manager of this team, right? So we've got decent sample sizes with these guys as coaches and as player personnel executives. I'll ask these rhetorical questions. Do you trust Joe Douglas, who has spent 5 years as the New York Jets head executive trying to build an offensive line? Do you trust him to get 3 starters along the offensive line in the offseason of 2024? Do you trust him to be able to find help for Garrett Wilson in the wide receiver room? Do you trust Robert Saleh, who after 3 years as a head coach has 3 wins in December and January? Do you trust him to all of a sudden figure out that he should go for it in certain spots on 4th down and shouldn't punt? Do you think all of a sudden, after 3 years, Robert Saleh is going to figure out the personnel to put in there? At some point, they are what they are. And I don't think they've earned this. Joe Douglas doesn't have my trust of being able to build a competent offensive line for Aaron Rodgers to be protected by in 2024. And Robert Saleh hasn't earned the trust of a coach that is going to maximize the potential of the roster he has and squeeze every little edge out to be able to win a game. Kevin Stefanski is getting the absolute most out of the Cleveland Browns right now with Joe Flacco as his quarterback. Kyle Shanahan is getting the absolute most out of every member of the San Francisco 49ers. Mike McDaniel is getting every ounce out of every player on the Miami Dolphins. Go up and down the teams that are in the playoffs. Baltimore, John Harbaugh. Seattle, Pete Carroll. Getting the most out of every single player they have to put themselves in a position. The New York Jets don't do that. And so when they decide preemptively for no reason on Christmas Eve that Joe Douglas, Robert Saleh, Nathaniel Hackett, and the majority of the coaching staff are staying intact and they're bringing themselves back for 2024, okay, I'm now bearish on your ability to be a competent team in 2024. I'll give you the whole offseason. I'm not going to, look at moves and completely overreact to one move or one draft pick. I'll let the whole picture play out. But right now, Glenn, as we sit here, how can anybody tell me that the New York Jets are going to be a playoff team in 2024 with this coaching staff? It's just not going to happen.
With this, again, I think the coaching is the bigger with Joe Douglas. My thing with Joe Douglas is if some of his offensive linemen could just start staying healthy, I think he could build an offensive line. Because right now you'd have Becton, AVT, Tippmann, which is a nice 3 out of 5.
Becton hasn't played well in a month. Becton hasn't played well in a month. Becton hasn't played well in a month.
Well, that's something we were going to get into because I discussed it on the previous show. There's got to be something going on with him. I looked at I don't know if you saw, I tweeted it earlier. And I'm going off the top of my head now, but I believe it was as a rookie when we knew Mekhi Becton would need some work. He didn't, it wasn't a lot of true pass sets at Louisville and all that. As a rookie, Mekhi Becton allowed a sack every 58 snaps, pass block snaps. This year, weeks 1 through 12, he allowed one sack every 70 pass block snaps. Over the past 4 weeks, I believe it's 1 every 32.
So
something's wrong.
Okay,
I don't know if it's fatigue. But basically what we know about Mekhi Becton, he looked phenomenal as a rookie. He got his knee wrecked, and he may never be the same guy again. So you've got to let him walk.
Right. He cannot be the starting left tackle or right tackle for this football team in 2024. It just can't happen.
He won't be on this roster.
He can't.
But it's up to Joe Douglas to find another Mekhi Becton who doesn't have Greg Van Roten fall on his leg and can stay healthy. Or find an Elijah Vera Tucker who can stay on the field. Maybe a Cooper Beebe. Stick with Joe Tip. I don't think the talent's been the issue. It's been the fact these guys can't stay on the field has been the biggest issue in terms of the O-line.
But it was his priority in his first press conference to build an offensive line. He's still building, and now in a pivotal offseason where they have no wiggle room, he needs 3 starting offensive linemen. There is nothing about the way Joe Douglas, and again, I don't think this is all on Joe. Like you mentioned, there's been injuries. But now, all of a sudden, after he hasn't been able to put it together in 5 years, in one offseason, you're going to find 3 starters?
But again, to me, there's a difference in can't put it together because you're not finding the players and can't put it together because something out of your control. These guys keep getting hurt.
But either way, they can't put it together. And if Aaron Rodgers goes down at any point in 2024 because of a bad offensive line, we're going to be having the same conversation that we had this year and the same conversation that we've had next year. So it's
right. But one of them, and this could just be my thinking, one of those scenarios is a GM's fault, can't find the talent. And the other one is just you had terrible luck and you found talented players who got. I'm not firing a GM who keeps finding talented players because they're getting hurt. That's beyond his control.
But I will tell you this:
his job is to project, can a guy play?
Right. You're asking for nuance in a situation that no longer gets the benefit of nuance. You either put together a group or you don't. I don't care why the group wasn't put together. If you don't put together a group that can win football games in 2024, you're not going to be here in 2025. It's just not going to happen. There is no more mulligan year.
Well,
And I will tell you,
and again, that's where I think the coaching is big. I think if he has a class where he finds another couple starters, but they're still not performing, I think if enough people can look at the roster and say, Here are the talented players who are not performing," that's gonna be on the coaches. Like, if you're John Idzik or you're Mike McCagnon and you're just drafting guys who can't play, then you gotta be let go. Versus, "We did a bad job hiring this coach. Let's bring somebody in who can cultivate and get the most out of this talent because we're bringing in some talented guys and get the talented guys on the field."
I'll tell you one other thing that bothered me about last night's game, and I know it bothered a lot of other people. Rich Cimini asks a very fair question. Robert is sitting up there and just does not look like he has any emotion whatsoever about what just occurred. That his team got embarrassed on national television again late in the season, just like it happened in Jacksonville last year. Embarrassed on national TV. A no-show. Your defense was a no-show. You were unprepared in the first quarter to play a football game.
Mhm.
Does it take a rocket scientist to understand, no Amari Cooper, let's make sure David Njoku doesn't go off for 138 yards in the first half? So after all of that, he sits up there and Rich asks a very honest question. And Robert decides to, joke with him and say, "Do you want me to throw the podium?" As if the question was out of line. I'm sorry, Robert has lost me. He just has.
Me too.
I no longer believe in this coaching staff. And so
Yeah.
because they're going to run it back with a group that I don't believe in, it's hard for me to believe that anything is going to change for 2024. Now, they can prove me wrong. They're going to have the opportunity to do so. But I again ask the same questions I asked a little bit ago. Do you trust Joe Douglas to find 3 offensive line starters in the offseason? And do you trust Robert Saleh to all of a sudden stop making egregious coaching mistakes in the middle of the game? And I'm not even talking about the penalties. I'm talking about decisions of when to punt, when to kick field goals, when to go for it. It was 34-17 with 9 minutes to go in the third quarter, and it's 4th and goal. If you kick the field goal, you still need 2 touchdowns. Do you think with this offense you're ever going to get that close again?
With
You've got
9
to get the
minutes.
touchdown.
Yeah.
And then you
I
took
couldn't believe it. I couldn't
and you
believe it.
took a penalty, and then the kick got blocked because that's exactly what you deserved for kicking it in that spot. The coaching is bad. The in-game coaching is absolutely terrible. And all you had to do as last night was look across the field. Bill Callahan is coaching circles around you with what he's doing with those offensive linemen. Kevin
Callahan's the
Stefanski
best, though.
coaching
He coached
circles
with
around you.
everyone.
Okay, but
I
you're
wish
getting
they could get him back.
Cleveland is winning 11 games, having similar, if not worse, injury luck than the New York Jets have. So spare me with this woe is me garbage. At some point, you're either a good coach and you can figure it out, or you can't. That's it. And the worst part is we're having this conversation, and it's not going to matter because they're just going to be back in 2024.
I know. I just
Wait until the first time they lose a game because of a poor coaching decision with Aaron Rodgers. Just wait, because it's going to happen. These games haven't mattered, so people just gloss over these egregious mistakes, but it's going to cost them a game.
That's why I said a couple weeks ago, and again, of course, Woody has come out and said that Robert Saleh is safe. I said a couple weeks ago that I wasn't so sure he was safe because I wouldn't be surprised if Aaron Rodgers is watching this, especially behind closed doors, and thinking, you know what, maybe this guy isn't a good coach. Like maybe Aaron Rodgers goes to Woody Johnson at some point and says, "Hey, you should move on from this guy." But apparently that didn't happen. He got public vote of confidence from the owner, public vote of confidence from Aaron Rodgers. So it's unfortunate, but I really think that I really think that this owner should have let this play out, let the rest of the season play out, and then at least go to Aaron Rodgers and say, "Listen, I'd really like to move on. Is that a no-go for you? Are you gonna walk away and retire, or are you gonna have a fit if I fire Robert Saleh?" Instead of just coming out and saying, "Yeah, he's coming back."
Again, you have a team here right now that should have used 2023 as an evaluation point for everybody on the roster and coaching included and the front office. And they are choosing to completely ignore what their eyes told them throughout 2023. They are choosing to ignore everything that we've talked about for weeks on this show. And they just think, bring Aaron Rodgers back, beef up the offensive line, and figure it out. Can I tell you what concerns me, Glenn? That all they're going to do this offseason is they're going to trade for Devontae Adams, they're going to trade for David Bakhtiari, and they're going to try to convince everybody that Aaron Rodgers being back with his buddies is going to be fine and everything's going to be okay.
Listen, if that happens, um, it's to me, and I'm not saying it won't. It's either if that's Joe Douglas's decision, I mean, he needs to be fired if they do that. But if they do that, it's so dumb that I would be convinced it wasn't Joe. Just as
You
I'm convinced that a lot of the moves this offseason, I don't think QB2 was Joe. I don't think signing all of Aaron Rodgers' friends was Joe. I think that was ownership saying, "Hey, Aaron's here now, so you give him everything he wants, Joe." Okay, I don't think what an amazing coincidence. He happened to love 5 of Aaron Rodgers' best friends, and he brought them all in as free agents in dead wood. Um, so if that were to happen, it's ownership, and this is never going to get better, which may be the case.
I'll
And
say
if
this.
it were Joe Douglas's call, he's got to go.
I'll say this because this team last offseason needed to bring in a quarterback, right? Everybody agreed. But the moment they chose for it to be Aaron Rodgers, they accelerated everything about what they were
Yep.
doing. Everything.
Yep.
And so when you do that, you organically shrink your window. You make it to where you have to win right away. And 2023 was a disaster. The right thing to do for this organization, personally, would have been to clean house across the board and just start over. Sorry, Aaron, it didn't work. We're going to move on. Joe's gone. Salah's gone. We've got a great roster that's going to be attractive to a GM and a head coach. They're going to be able to put their marks on this team and get their quarterback in here. And they could have been just as competitive in 2024 as I think people think they're going to be next season. But now they're going to double down. They're going to double down. And so don't be surprised. And I've said this to some friends off microphone. I'm going to say it on microphone. If I'm wrong, I'm happy to be wrong. I think we are going to see, and there's no reason, I have no source on this. This is just a personal gut feeling. I think we're going to see a major player on the offense for this football team ask out this offseason. I think Garrett Wilson is going to ask to be playing someplace else in 2024. He is,
I actually made that point.
Visibly frustrated at times. Visibly frustrated.
I made the point a few weeks ago, and we're going to wrap this up here in a couple minutes. Short show this week, but I made the point a couple weeks ago that the big first round, the Garrett, the Sauce, the JJ, I can see a path to every one of them wanting a new deal or out. I can see Sauce saying, "I'm the face of your franchise in New York City. I need more money." I can see Jermaine Johnson saying, "I'm a lot older than most first rounders. I don't know if I'll get a third contract. I want my money now." And I can see Garrett Wilson saying, "This place is a disaster. I want out or I want money." And the Jets, it's all going to come down again. Is Aaron Rodgers going to be able to, especially Garrett Wilson, is Aaron Rodgers going to be able to say, "Listen, man, chill out. I'm coming back. You're going for 1,700 yards this year and getting a mega contract if you stay put." That's the way I see it happening.
Yeah.
But he's not happy. And
No,
he's
not.
made it very clear. You can see him on the sideline. You hear him in interviews. Garrett Wilson's not happy, nor should he be.
And it's
But
visible.
I think Aaron Rodgers is the guy you can say, "I'm going to get you to 1,700 yards and make you the highest paid receiver in the NFL. Don't go anywhere."
Yeah, it's one of those things where I just think everybody is sitting back and saying, okay, we've been through the worst of it. This season stunk. Aaron Rodgers got hurt 4 plays in, but don't worry. Offseason, Joe Douglas is going to add to this team. Aaron Rodgers is going to come back, and we're going to be great. And there's the back of my mind, a little voice in my head that goes, it's the New York Jets. Something crazy is going to happen in the offseason. And it's not hard. It's not a big leap to say it might be that Garrett Wilson wants out.
Yeah, like I said, I can see a path to all 3 of those guys wanting a new deal, and if any of them want out, I could see it being Garrett. It's in us, man. We're Jets fans. I told you and Dylan, right? I didn't say it on air, but after the Rodgers injury, I told you guys I had a text exchange with a friend of mine the day after the Rodgers trade, and he said, "What do you expect?" He's not a football fan. He lives in the UK, but he knows I like the Jets. He saw it on the news. He said, "What do you expect with this guy?" I said, "I expect him to miss the year and get hurt week 1." It's what I expected, and we saw it.
Yeah, it's just the way it works. And again, I don't want to devote too much time to breaking down exactly what happened with Cleveland last night because it doesn't matter. It's emblematic of a bigger picture thing than the fact that they lost 37-20 or whatever the final score was in that game. It's the fact that they have long-term coaching problems and they're just going to run it back. And so until then, again, wait until week 4 next season to where they should go for it on 4th and goal, but he chooses to kick a field goal and it costs him the game. Everyone's going to lose their minds, and
especially Aaron Rodgers.
And we're going to be the people that would be like, "Told you this last year. The writing was on the wall. This is what they were doing when they were 6-11."
Yep.
But nobody wanted to pay attention.
The
they don't win primetime games. He doesn't get his guys ready for primetime games. They're 3-21 lifetime in December. And I will give you this stat courtesy of Connor Rogers to close out. First half last night, 376 yards for the Cleveland offense, 17 first downs, 5 of 6 on third down, 27 points. A defensive-minded head coach walked into a Thursday night football game and got embarrassed in the first half by Joe Flacco, who was without Nick Chubb, without 3 starting tackles, and without Amari Cooper. Allowed 376, 17 first downs, 5 of 6 on third down, 27 points. Sorry, Robert, you lost me. I'm out on you. I'm out. You've got to earn my trust back. I'm out.
I don't blame you. I'm right there with you. We're gonna wrap this one up. Have a good one, Jets fans. One more week of this, and draft talk on the way soon. Maybe a little bit
All
next
right,
week.
now that gets me excited.
Yeah, but we got to wrap this one up for now. Have a good one, Jets fans. Take care. Be sure to log into jetnation.com, most active Jets message board.